Compton. Nigga just aired the police out, nigga. They just aired the police out, nigga. It go up in Compton. Them niggas just got aired out, cuz. They just bust on them niggas, cuz. That's crazy. Damn. Oh, it goes down in Compton. Oh, they just got bust on. That nigga on a knee. Damn. Police just got aired out, nigga. They just got bust on, nigga. They just got aired out. They just got aired out, nigga. It's going up. Somebody bust on their ass. Somebody bust on the police, nigga. Damn, nigga. Oh. Oh, two sheriffs shot in the face. Two sheriffs shot in the face. They tripping. It's going up in Compton. Niggas bust on the police, nigga. Nigga. They just got aired out. Somebody ran up on the car and bust on their ass. Right through the window, in the face and all, nigga. It's a wrap.
In LA County, there were 2 officers who were shot. None of them died. They went to the hospital, and a group of left-wing fanatics went to the hospital and they began to scream, "We hope you effing die." Now, these are the people who talk about systemic racism and oppression on black, brown, and minority folks. And that's how these people act. That's the level of their compassion. Like, they have no humanity. And there was a sheriff. It says here that LA County Sheriff Alex Villanueva, he described these protesters as almost worthy of ISIS. And the crowd of protesters chanted, "We hope they die." And it says here that the 2 deputies, Claudia Apolinar, 31, and her 24-year-old male partner were shot multiple times at close range as they sat in their patrol car in a chilling caught-on-video ambush. And it says here that the sick protesters who blocked the entrance to St. Francis Medical Center, where the deputies fought for their lives, chanted, "We hope they effing die." Systemic racism and oppression. So, in a country where you are given the right to go to a hospital and scream in regards to 2 police officers who were shot multiple times in an ambush, "We hope you effing die." In a country where you are free to say that and to do that, we have systemic and racism, racial oppression of black, brown, and minority folks. You know, this whole thing about hating the police is one of the dumbest things I've ever heard in my life. It's one of the craziest things I've ever heard in my life. You know, it's like this. If someone says, "Hey, I heard a story about a black guy who robbed an old white lady. You see, this is the problem with blacks. They're violent." And some left-winger comes along and says, "Hey, you can't say that. Yeah, you heard a story about one black guy who did something bad, but you can't generalize all black folks like that." And that person would be correct. That would be an adequate, valid correction. But yet these same people do it with police officers. Yeah, sure, you can find some stories of one cop or a small number of cops doing things that they shouldn't be doing. But the vast majority of the times, cops are cordial and they are doing the correct, moral, and right thing. But yet you have these fanatics who basically have a Jacobin ideology and mentality. You have these fanatics who come out and say things like, well, no, because the police are simply the arm of a systemic system of racism and oppression against black, brown, and minority folks. And they have this insane way of thinking. It's like the French Revolution, where, hey, if you said something nice about the king, you need to be guillotined. If you said something good about the king, you get the guillotine. And that is essentially what we're dealing with here. Just go online and type in police officer rescues on Google News, and you get an entire plethora of stories of cops doing great things for society. For example, I just typed in police officer rescues on Google News, or officer rescues on Google News, and this is what I got. Ohio police officer rescues stranded motorist from flash flooding. Police officer rescues dog from hot car. Ohio officer rescues puppy. Okay, we got that one already. Duncanville officer rescues 1-year-old left in locked vehicle. Police officer rescues driver stranded in flood. This is all recent news. Ohio police officer rescues child from wrecked car after rollover crash. Twinsburg, Ohio police officer acts quickly to rescue child from rollover crash. We already read that one. It says here, off-duty Redwood City police officer Matt Seidzik rescues teens from Maserati engulfed in flames. Duncanville police officer saves infant from blocked hot car. Michigan DNR officer rescues elderly woman from burning home in Spring Lake. And let's go back to a story that a lot of people were talking about a number of weeks ago. 39 children who went missing were rescued in Atlanta, Georgia. 39 children. They were locked up in some compartment of some sort, and they were being sex trafficked. These kids were being sex trafficked. They were they were held hostage by sex traffickers in Atlanta, Georgia. And they were rescued. 39 children. Little black kids. Who rescued them? Who rescued them, police officers? You can go see the video for yourself. Who's rescuing those kids? Who's holding those kids? Who's giving comfort and security to those kids? Police officers. My father, when he was very young, he was rescued by cops. He was in his 20s, and this was during the Rodney King riots. Nothing has really changed. And my father was in Oakland, California at the time, and there were riots. There were violent protesters, the whole thing. Kind of like, well, pretty much like today. And they surrounded my father's car. They were holding blunt objects, sticks, bats, things like that. And about 18 police officers came in on motorcycles and scared that crowd away. My father had a knife in his hand, and he had a can of pepper spray in his other hand. And he was ready to fight, and he was rescued by police officers. And there are so many stories that you can read about people being rescued by cops. But yet you'll find one story about some guy who says, I can't breathe, which if you watch the show Cops is said a lot of times by people who are about to get arrested by police officers. One guy dies, and before there's even a conclusion in the trial, they want to kill all cops. Now, these people will complain about racism, and I'm not saying we shouldn't talk about racism. For those of you who've been following me, you guys know I've been talking about racism for years. I've been talking about the dangers of the right wing for years. But these are people who sit here and talk about racism and why we shouldn't generalize people. They'll talk about, and they'll say, well, a cop doesn't have to be a cop. If you're black, you're born that way. You can't change being black, so you can't even equate the two. Okay, what about being Muslim? You don't have to be a Muslim. Even if you're born Muslim, even if you're brought up into the religion of Islam, you don't have to be Muslim. My father was Muslim. He left Islam. But yet, these same people will say, well, you can't generalize all Muslims. Well, you don't have to be a Muslim. And they will put racism at the same level of so-called Islamophobia. Wait a second, but you don't have to be Muslim. You can't equate Islam to a race. But yet, they don't give the same treatment for police officers. And they will generalize all cops and say all cops are bastards, all cops are pigs. What is happening here? What is happening here is an attempt to break down society. You know, there's a reason why those right-wing fanatics, they call themselves Boogaloo Boys, those right-wing fanatics were talking about taking advantage of the anti-police movement in order to cause the breakdown of society. There's a reason for that. There's a reason that some fanatic Boogaloo terrorist in California murdered a police officer and then got into a shootout with other cops and murdered another police officer. And then he said, well, we were hoping, well, before that actually, he said, our plan is to spark violence in order to, in conjunction with taking advantage of the anti-police movement, cause a breakdown of society. It's a strategy of tension. They see a bunch of people hate the cops. Hey, cops are one of the reasons why we have an orderly society. Let's attack the institution of the police. And then we have a breakdown of society. And right-wingers can take advantage of the situation. Left-wingers can take advantage of this situation. But there's a reason why we have these left-wing fanatics taking advantage of this situation, because they know that the anti-police sentiment, the anti-police atmosphere that is fomenting and being cultivated can be used for societal breakdown. And so essentially what the left in this regard is aiming for, what these fanatic Jacobins are aiming for, is essentially the same thing as what these fanatic right-wingers are aiming for, and that is the breakdown of society. The right-wingers talk about a race war and the breakdown of society and anarchy, and they want this. It's part of their fantasy. And you have these left-wing fanatics who want to establish their utopia, and they believe in sparking revolution in order to direct the violence and direct the chaos towards Marxism. So they both have somewhat different goals, but their means to their goals are the same. And the end result will, for the most part, be the same. It's going to be a bunch of people being killed. So that's what is taking place. And it really pisses me off that people can be so destructive, so callous, so evil, so absent of compassion. Because if you hate the police, you have no compassion. If you hate the police, you have no compassion, you have no empathy, you have no love. Because if you have love and compassion, then you're going to want to see order in society. If you hate the police, you hate one of the institutions that keep society orderly. Bottom line. Anyway, hope you guys have learned something from this video. You guys just heard some theology. God bless.